Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Thursday, April 8th, and we're breaking down this 7-game day slate that we have over on DraftKings. Back-to-back day slates, which I guess I'm okay with, but I prefer the games to be later in the day because I have more time to think about stuff, and you guys have more time to come in and watch these videos, but it's whatever. But if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, follow me over on social media, and the handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. If you want to help support the channel, over on Patreon, link is down below for that if you want access to the optimizer, the projections, the rankings, the Discord community, all of that fun stuff. But I think that's it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we will start with the pitching. And I got to be honest, this is not the greatest pitching slate in the world. Yesterday was absolutely loaded. We had so many good SP1s to choose from, and Trevor Bauer, Blake Snell, and Shane Bieber. And the SP2s were absolutely loaded. It's probably the best SP2 slate I have seen in quite some time. We had Maeda, Jack Flaherty, Ryu. I think Brandon Woodruff was on there as well, and he had a really good game. I think he only gave up one hit and had a lot of strikeouts as well. So it's a very loaded pitching slate. This time around, not so great. These guys are fine options, but even then, they're not like Shane Biebers and Trevor Bauers of the world, but we can't get that every single slate. But where this slate lacks in pitching is the SP2s. I don't really trust any of those guys, and as you can see, I don't really have any of them listed. I don't like Taijuan Walker that much, Eduardo Rodriguez, Matt Harvey, I obviously would never play. Then you have Eduardo Rodriguez and just some overall mediocre pitchers like Jake Arrieta, and I feel like they're a bit expensive as well. So my plan as of right now is just kind of spend it for pitching, and these guys aren't overly expensive. And if you just roster two of these guys in your lineup, you're still working with around $4,000 per batter, which you can easily do. If you throw in a cheap catcher, a cheap second baseman, or a cheap outfielder, you can really make work, and you can easily do stacks in Coors Field because those guys aren't super expensive once again. So I think this is still a fine way to go, even though these are the three most expensive pitchers on the slate. But we're going to start up top with Jose Berrios, just below $10,000, sitting at $9,800, and a good matchup here versus the Seattle Mariners. And Jose Berrios had an excellent opening day. He had around 40 DraftKings points, didn't give up a hit, didn't give up a walk, had 12 strikeouts, had close to 40 DraftKings points, had an amazing performance on opening day. Unfortunately, they didn't let him go deep and see if he could have got that no-hitter, but overall, very impressive performance. Now, the thing with Jose Berrios is in recent seasons, he hasn't been that big of a strikeout guy. Like, even last year, he was at 25%, which is not terrible, but it's not like it's 30% above. But 25% is not that bad at 4.28 xFIP. He's just not a guy I roster too much, but with the nature of this slate and the matchup that he has, he's going to definitely be a very appealing option here. If we look at the Mariners' splits last season versus right-handed pitching, it's not terrible, but it's definitely not that great either. A 24% K rate, close to a double-digit walk rate, which I don't love, but still a 146 ISO, 241 batting average, a 99 WRC+. I can get behind Jose Berrios being the SP1 on this slate, although Corbin Burnes definitely gives him a run for his money with his insane strikeout upside, and he showed that on opening day when he was in a pitching duel with the guy that we just talked about in Jose Berrios. Corbin Burnes had an excellent start where he had over 30 DraftKings points, struck out 11 on 87 pitches, and I believe the only hit he gave up was a home run. So it was a solo shot, so he did give up a run, but still an absolutely phenomenal day from Corbin Burnes, and he carried that strikeout upside that he showed last year in an abbreviated season into this one, so that's definitely a positive thing to see. But last year, he had an insane 37% K rate, the xFIP below 3, only a .075 ISO given up, 174 batting average, a 249 slugging, and a 239 WOBA. Gets a good amount of ground balls as well. Doesn't really let the ball leave the park too much. Only 0.3 home runs per 9 innings. So if you want to play Burnes over Berrios in cash games, I totally understand that because the strikeouts, I feel like they're going to be there every single week from Corbin Burnes. Now, this matchup versus St. Louis isn't one I'm really too scared of. I know they got some decent bats in the lineup like Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, but even then, I think the strikeout upside is going to be there for him, and that's what we want in DFS. We want strikeouts, and with the way the pitching is in this slate, I guess I'd probably rank him over Berrios, to be honest, but I do like the matchup for Berrios versus the Seattle Mariners. They only have a 3.36 implied team total against him. He's a pretty heavy favorite as well, as a 6.5 K prop in Vegas. But Corbin Burnes only 3.76 runs against him. A slight favorite, not a heavy favorite, but he's a slight favorite and a 7.5 K prop over in Vegas. So it's kind of a toss-up for me for SP1. Lance Lynn's going to be my SP2 more than likely, but you can make a case for either Burnes or Berrios here. But I do like the strikeout upside a little bit more with Corbin Burnes there. And then Lance Lynn, I'm just landing on him because of the price point. I think he could be above 9K here, and he's not. And the matchup versus the Royals isn't that scary. Shane Bieber just got done putting up around 30 fantasy points versus them, struck out 12. I wouldn't say Lance Lynn is Shane Bieber, but he's still an overall pretty darn good pitcher. Only a 3.68 implied team total against him, a 6.5 K prop over in Vegas, a decent favorite as well. Looking at his numbers last season, had around a 26% K rate, 3.32 ERA paired with a 4.34 xFIP, which isn't something that excites me too much, but didn't give up much power, and he's a guy that will go deep into the game every single time. You don't have to worry about pitch counts with Lance Lynn. I think last year, I think he was over 100 pitches in all but maybe like 1 or 2 games. So matchup here versus the Royals. I know they have some decent pieces in their offense, like with Merrifield, Jorge Soler, Carlos Santana, Salvador Perez, and some other pieces, but not an overall offense I'm going to be too scared of. So Lance Lynn at $8,700. I could see him being the most popular pitcher on the slate just because I think people are going to be pretty split on Jose Barrios and Corbin Burns, and Lance Lynn's kind of just that guy that falls in place at SP2 today. But that's going to be it for the pitching for the most part. Kind of short and simple here, but these are the 3 guys I like the most. So with that being said, I think we can move on to the bats. And starting up top with catcher, we have Mitch Garver here at the mid 4K price tag and should be leading off versus lefty as he was yesterday. And assuming they keep a similar lineup, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. And we saw in recent years where Mitch Garver would lead off versus lefties as well. In the past, he's always had some good numbers versus lefties, plenty of power. Last year, didn't have a lot of power in his bat. It's an abbreviated season though, so I'm not going to look too much into it. But Marco Gonzalez, it's not like I'm really trying to pick on him. I'm just mainly kind of picking power righties versus him that could potentially take him deep because he does have a decently high fly ball rate, but he doesn't give up a ton of power, and he's got a K rate in the low to mid 20s, so I'm not really trying to pick on him. But I do have some power righties that I do like versus him, but I'm not really sure I'd want to full-on stack Minnesota, to be honest, even though I'm not against it. I do have a decent amount of Minnesota guys on this sheet here, but it's mainly just due to pricing and just some of their splits versus left-handed pitching. But he's a fine option if you're spending up a catcher because typically we don't get catchers hitting near the top of the order. Omar Narvaez, $3,200. He didn't make the lineup yesterday, but assuming he's back in it today, he's going to be facing a righty, Adam Wainwright, who's always struggled versus lefties in recent seasons. So I think we can certainly go back to the Narvaez as well, who was hitting very well before not playing yesterday. So if you want to ride the hot hand there, totally get it. He's just one of those guys that like to plug and play at catcher because he's cheap and he's got some decent splits versus right-handed pitching. Then Dom Nunez, it never hurts to play the catcher in Coors Field, especially if they're cheap. He actually, I believe, has 2 home runs this year as well. So if you just want to throw in a Coors bat versus Merrill Kelly. Now, Merrill Kelly is not the worst pitcher in the world. I feel like we should talk about his splits really quick because we're going to talk about plenty of Rockies players. So his numbers aren't that bad. Last season, in 31 innings, he had a 3.95 xFIP, 23% K rate, didn't really walk guys. Did give up a little bit of pop, though, close to a 200 ISO, but only a 218 batting average. But he did give up a hard contact rate of 43%. So there's definitely some upside here for the Rockies. And we know Coors Field's a different beast. So I don't think it's going to be the greatest game here for Merrill Kelly. And the Rockies do have one of the highest implied team totals on the slate at 5.61. Not quite as high as Arizona, as they're an overall better matchup here, but I do like Dom Nunez just for cheap at catcher. And then going down to first base, we have Christian Walker for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I like all the D-backs for the most part. I'm not sure if I have the entire roster listed here. I know I don't have Carson Kelly, the catcher, but besides him, I think I got pretty much everybody. But they have the highest implied team total on the slate, close to 6 here. Weather's going to be good in Colorado. It looks like around 70 degrees. I didn't really check if it was sunny or not, but I didn't see any precipitation in the forecast, so we should be good to go. So we should be good to go there. And we know Coors Field, the ball is going to travel. And John Gray, not the best pitcher in the world, got a bit roughed up in his first start versus the Dodgers. And while the Diamondbacks aren't the Dodgers, it's still Coors Field, and John Gray historically struggles in Coors. I prefer lefties versus him, but we can use lefties and righties. And Christian Walker's got power versus both lefties or righties. So pretty much all systems go here for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Kind of my favorite stack on the slate. They're not overly expensive either. Christian Walker is a bit pricey, but everyone else is in that low 4K to 3K range, so it's pretty easy to stack them up with the more expensive pitchers that we have that we talked about early on. So like Christian Walker, and the Rockies bullpen's not that great either. Miguel Sano, similar to what I talked about with Mitch Garver, he's a fine power righty versus him, but I'm not really trying to pick on him too much. The thing with Sano is he's either going to strike out or he's going to get that homer, so he's a bit of a risky play. Probably wouldn't go there in cash games. He also hits in the bottom half of the order as well, which isn't super appealing, but if you are using like a power righty twin stack, you gotta play Sano because he's got plenty of upside in that bat. CJ Cron, $3,800. This is just getting more Coors Field exposure. I prefer him versus lefties, but I will take any Rockies and Arizona Diamondbacks players that you give me in this game, and it's really just as simple as that. Then going down to McMahon, the price is a little bit up there, probably because of that triple dunk performance he had 2 nights ago, but he's got power versus righties. Looking at his splits last season versus right-handed pitching, not the best hitter in the world, but there is a little bit of pop in his bat. 167 ISO, again, not that great. He has a low batting average and a really high strikeout rate. Doesn't really walk that much either, but he's not going to triple dong every single night, obviously. But he's got a little bit of power there. Should be hitting near the middle of the order, and there should be plenty of RBI opportunities for Ryan McMahon, but he's definitely not my favorite second baseman on the slate because of that price point. If you want to go a little bit cheaper, which I probably will at second today, Colton Wong looks like an interesting option here leading off versus the righty Adam Wainwright. Colton Wong, not a guy that possesses a ton of power, but Wainwright will struggle versus the lefties, and Colton Wong is a guy that makes a lot of contact, doesn't really strike out too much. It can certainly get on base here, potentially swipe a bag as well at some point because he does have some speed there. Don't expect the home run out of him, but if he can just get on base a couple times, get a couple runs, that's not that bad of a performance. It's only $3,300. Garrett Hampson should be hitting to the top of the order here for the Rockies, which in my opinion is the best stack on the entire slate. Vegas would agree as well, as they're sitting at 5.89 right now, close to 6. Wouldn't be surprised if that gets even closer to 6 or maybe even above that by the time the game starts tomorrow. But I like Garrett Hampson. Another guy doesn't really have a ton of power in his bat, doesn't hit for a high batting average either, but it's mainly just getting Coors Field exposure, and he's not priced like he's in Coors Field whatsoever. So I just like taking the value there at a position that's really not that great today, in my opinion. And then dropping down to third, if you're spending up, I like Rafael Devers here quite a bit. I know he's very expensive at $5,400, but I like picking on Matt Harvey. I know he kind of stifled the Red Sox in his first start, which was pretty surprising, and I did stack the Red Sox that day, so I was a little disappointed, but they have a team total above 5 here. Wouldn't be surprised if that kind of rises towards game time. But they're facing Baltimore in Baltimore, so you get those guaranteed ninth inning at-bats. And this is a very hitter-friendly park here in Camden Yards. So Matt Harvey, don't think his luck's going to keep on going here. Boston got a chance to see him already multiple times through the order. Now they're going to face him once again, so I think that's even better practice for them. But Rafael Devers crushes right-handed pitching, and Matt Harvey sucks versus both lefties and righties, but especially versus lefties. It's a small sample size last year of only 6 innings versus lefties, but he had a 14 ERA, 9.5 xFIP, a 10% K rate, and just some overall horrendous numbers. A 471 batting average and a 353 ISO. And Devers has elite numbers versus right-handed pitching, so if you got the money for him, if you're just doing a Boston stack, you can't leave Devers out of there, even though he is hitting 5th, which isn't as appealing as a guy hitting 4th or 3rd, but plenty of RB opportunities for Devers there. And if you want to go a little bit cheaper, I just like grabbing a couple of these Herrera and Eduardo Escobar, the best hitters in the world. No, but they're on one of the best stacks in the entire slate, facing a pitcher I'm not too scared of in John Gray, and the best hitting park in the entire league. So both guys make sense here, even though their numbers aren't super duper impressive. Then going down to shortstop, if you want to spend up, I like 2 options here in Xander Bogaerts and Trevor Story. And also Josh Rojas isn't really a value play. So if you do want to spend up, shortstop is probably a good position to do that. But Xander Bogaerts facing Matt Harvey. Some of the reasons I had for Rafael Devers, I just like the Boston stack here. I feel like their team total of 5 might be a little bit too low. I could see that rising throughout the day tomorrow, but it's a hitter-friendly park. Guaranteed 9th inning at bats. Xander Bogaerts is good versus lefties and righties, and Matt Harvey is bad versus both lefties and righties. So he is totally viable batting cleanup for the Red Sox. Trevor Story, $5,100. He's good versus both lefties and righties, similar to Xander Bogaerts. And we're in Coors Field. The Rockies have the highest implied team total on the slate. Not much not to like here. Story will strike out. Merrill Kelly is not the worst pitcher in the world. Did have a decent K rate last year, but he did allow a lot of hard contact. So if Story can make contact here, get the ball in the air, there's always home run potential for Story there, and plenty of RBI opportunity as well. Then Josh Rojas, he's leading off for one of the best stacks on the slate, right up there with the Colorado Rockies, or at least projected to lead off, I should say. But his numbers aren't super impressive, but you get the lefty on righty matchup versus John Gray, and I do prefer lefties versus John Gray, and we're in Coors Field, so you guys get the idea. All the Diamondbacks, all the Rockies are good plays on the slate, in my opinion. And then dropping down to the outfield, we have JD Martinez leading us off here at a massive price point at $5,600, and he was a lot cheaper start the season. I think he started the season off around $4,300, so his price has definitely rose a bit, but it's deservedly so. He's been great to start the year, kind of been the only Red Sox that you can trust so far this year. But I like getting bats versus Matt Harvey. I prefer JD Martinez versus lefties, but Matt Harvey's not a guy that's going to strike out a lot of guys. He's going to definitely serve up some meatballs here. So JD Martinez, I think he's certainly playable if you are stacking the Red Sox, but he's a bit pricey for me, so I'd only get there more than likely in Red Sox stacks. Then Nelson Cruz versus a lefty is always in play. He's got astronomically great numbers versus left-handed pitching, even though Marco Gonzalez doesn't suck or anything, but Nelson Cruz is just so good versus lefties, it's hard to ignore. Last season, an abbreviated year, a 907 slugging, 549 base percentage, only a 7% K rate, 442 ISO, 465 batting average, and a near 600 WOBA. And to be honest, those numbers aren't super far off from what we saw in 2019, even though those numbers are insane. So Nelson Cruz, always in play versus a lefty. He also has like 3 home runs in his first 4 games so far this year. Charlie Blackmon, $5,000. If you're stacking up the Rockies, you can't leave off arguably their best player right up there with Trevor Story. an integral part of that stack. I know he's pretty expensive, but he's great versus righties and versus lefties. So $5,000, you get a nice discount from Nelson Cruz and JD Martinez if you do want to spend up in the outfield. Then Kike Hernandez, he's also eligible at second base, and I feel like I'd be more likely to use him at second base because it's an overall weaker position. But he's also eligible in the outfield, so I do have him listed here. I prefer him versus lefties, but again, I'll take anybody with a heartbeat versus Matt Harvey, assuming the old Matt Harvey shows up, which I certainly think he could. Alex Verdugo, he's in the same boat, but he is a lefty versus Matt Harvey, which I do prefer. David Peralta, just a cheap option in Coors Field. He's actually one of my favorite options, I would say, relative to their price points on this slate for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I like the price spot at $4,000. He's going to be batting cleanup here. He's got some decent numbers versus right-handed pitching. If we actually expand that to his exact splits versus righties last year instead of his overall numbers, had a 312 batting average versus them and a near 170 plate appearance sample size, which is decent enough for what we saw last year for most batters. 117 WRC plus, 20% K rate, which isn't terrible. An 816 OPS, 351 on base percentage. So David Peralta, definitely one of the better plays on the entire slate of all players and all positions. Raimel Tapia should be leading off here for the Rockies in Coors Field with the highest implied team total on the slate. Not a guy that possesses a ton of power, but he doesn't really strike out too much, and he's got a pretty high batting average as well. Looking at last year's numbers, Michael Conforto, $3,600. It looks like we haven't seen a confirmed pitcher for the Marlins yet, but it looks like it's going to be Nick Nieder here, if I am pronouncing his name right. And I'm mainly just interested in the lefty on righty matchup here for Michael Conforto, because last year his numbers versus righties were pretty excellent. He had a 344 batting average with a 414 WOBA, 166 WRC plus, and a 429 on base percentage. Did strike out a little bit, but the upside is certainly there, and I think he's a little bit too cheap. And then if you want to go really cheap here, we have Sam Hilliard and Kyle Garlick. Sam Hilliard, he's just a cheap option for Coors Field. He does have a bit of pop in his bat as well. He's going to be hitting near the bottom of the order, but you get the lefty on righty matchup there versus Merrill Kelly. And Kyle Garlick, he actually batted second yesterday versus a lefty. So if they keep that same thing going on, he hits second once again versus the lefty and Marco Gonzalez. $2,400 is not a bad price point for a guy that's got the platoon advantage there. Even though I'm not trying to pick on Marco Gonzalez, it's mainly just a price thing, especially if we are going to be paying up for pitchers today. But I think that's going to be it for the video, guys, so I do appreciate you watching. This might have been a quicker video than usual, but I just got done recording a NASCAR video, which took a couple of hours to make and edit, so I was a bit tired, and it's around 2 a.m. when I'm recording this, so I do apologize if I just kind of breeze through this, but the slate's starting early at 1 o'clock, so I wanted to get this out as quick as possible and edit it so it could be up in time. But I appreciate you watching. And if you found this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, leave your comments down below if you have any. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want access to the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, all that fun stuff, link is down below. Social media handles in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. With that being said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Hope wherever you live, the weather is wonderful, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.